You can walk away, everyone else did. The words hung in the cold night air, quiet but heavy, like they carried the weight of 100 rejections. Lily Carter froze, her plastic fork hovering halfway to her mouth. The alley behind the restaurant smelled faintly of grease and rain, the kind of place no one lingered unless they had nowhere else to go. A flickering light buzzed overhead, casting uneven shadows across the cracked concrete. It was just past 9 p.m., the end of her double shift, and this was the only break she'd managed to steal all day. In her hands was a small takeout box, lukewarm mashed potatoes, a piece of grilled chicken, nothing special, but it was everything she had. She hadn't eaten since early morning, and even then, it was just coffee and half a bagel she'd saved from yesterday. Her stomach tightened, reminding her how badly she needed this. Slowly, she looked up. The man standing a few feet away didn't look dangerous, just worn. His jacket was thin, damp from the misting rain, his dark hair slightly disheveled, and his eyes were the kind that made you pause. Not because they were striking, but because they looked tired in a way that felt deeper than just a long day. He wasn't reaching for her, wasn't stepping closer. He just stood there, as if even asking had taken everything out of him. "I'm sorry," he added, quieter now, almost like he regretted speaking at all. "I shouldn't have said anything." Lily's grip tightened around the plastic container. She could feel the warmth of the food fading through the thin lid, slipping away second by second. This wasn't just dinner. This was the difference between going to bed with something in her stomach or lying awake listening to the ache of hunger. Her rent was already 3 days late. Her manager had warned her twice this week about attitude. One more mistake, and she was out. Everything in her life felt like it was balancing on a thread that could snap at any moment. She knew what the smart choice was. Look away. Pretend she didn't hear him. Walk back inside, clock out, and hold on to the one thing she had left tonight. That's what everyone else had done. She swallowed, her gaze dropping briefly to the container in her hands. Then she looked back at him. "You said everyone else walked away?" she asked, her voice steady, though her heart wasn't. He gave a small nod, almost apologetic. For a moment, the world seemed to narrow to just the two of them. The hum of the city fading into the background, the cold air brushing against her skin, the quiet space between what she had and what she could give. Lily exhaled slowly. "Then I won't be like everyone else." Before she could second-guess herself, she stepped forward and pressed the container into his hands. Not half, not a portion, all of it. The man blinked, clearly caught off guard. "You don't have to, I know," she cut in gently, offering a small, tired smile. "But I want to." For a second, neither of them moved. Then he took it, carefully, like it was something fragile, something that could break if he held it too tightly. "Thank you," he said, and there was something in his voice, something real, something unguarded, that made her chest tighten in a way she didn't quite understand. Lily shrugged lightly, though her empty hands suddenly felt colder than before. "Food tastes better when it's shared anyway," she said, even though she wouldn't be tasting any of it tonight. He studied her for a moment, like he was trying to remember every detail, every word. Then he gave a small nod. "I'll remember that." She didn't think much of it. People said things all the time. Promises, gratitude, words that disappeared as quickly as they came. Lily turned, pushing open the heavy back door of the restaurant, the warmth and noise swallowing her as if nothing had happened. Behind her, the alley fell quiet again. And in that quiet, the man looked down at the simple meal in his hands, not as food, but as something far more valuable. Something he hadn't expected to find that night. Something he wasn't going to forget. By the time Lily stepped back onto the restaurant floor, the warmth that had wrapped around her just moments ago felt almost suffocating, like it did not belong to her anymore. Plates clattered, orders were shouted across the kitchen, and the sharp voice of her manager cut through the noise like a blade. "Carter, where have you been?" Lily forced her shoulders back, slipping into motion before the question could turn into something worse. "Taking out the trash," she said quickly, grabbing a tray before anyone could stop her. It was not entirely a lie, but it was not the truth either. The truth was still standing in that alley, holding her only meal. She moved through the tables with practiced efficiency, balancing plates, refilling drinks, smiling when expected. But the longer the night went on, the more she could feel the emptiness settling in. It was not just hunger. It was the kind of hollow feeling that made every step a little heavier, every sound a little sharper. At one table, a couple sent back a perfectly good steak because it was not warm enough. At another, someone left half a plate untouched without a second thought. Lily cleared the dishes silently, her eyes lingering for just a second too long before she turned away. Around 10:30, her manager stopped her near the kitchen entrance, his expression tight. "You are slowing down," he said. "We are not paying you to drift off." Lily nodded, swallowing the response that rose to her lips. "Yes, sir. And fix your posture. Customers notice these things." He walked away before she could answer, leaving her standing there with a tray in her hands and a knot tightening in her chest. She adjusted her grip and kept moving. She always did. By the time her shift finally ended, the restaurant had quieted to a low hum. Chairs were being stacked, lights dimmed, and the last customers filtered out into the night. Lily clocked out with tired fingers, the screen glowing faintly as it confirmed what she already knew. Another long day. Another paycheck that would barely stretch far enough. She stepped outside through the front entrance this time, pulling her thin jacket tighter around herself as the cool air met her skin. The street was calmer now, the city settling into that strange in-between hour where everything felt slower, quieter, almost suspended. Her stomach twisted again, sharper this time. She had nothing left to quiet it. For a moment, she considered going back around to the alley, just to see if the man was still there. The thought came and went just as quickly. He was gone. People like him did not stay. People like her did not get second chances to change anything. She started walking, her shoes scuffing lightly against the pavement, each step measured, familiar. The neon glow of a nearby diner flickered in the distance, but she did not have the money to go inside. Not tonight. As she passed a darkened storefront, her reflection caught briefly in the glass. Same worn jacket. Same tired eyes. Nothing had changed. And yet, something felt different. She could not explain it. Only that the moment in the alley stayed with her, replaying in the quiet corners of her mind. The way he had looked at her. The way he had said thank you, like it meant more than just a meal. Lily shook her head lightly, as if trying to push the thought away. It did not matter. Tomorrow would come, and it would look just like today. Work, bills, survival. That was the rhythm of her life now. But somewhere, without her knowing, that small choice she made in the alley had already begun to shift something far bigger than she could see. And for the first time in a long while, as she disappeared down the dimly lit street, the night did not feel quite as empty as it had before. The next morning came too fast. Lily woke before the sun had fully risen, the pale gray light slipping through the thin curtains of her small room. The air felt colder than usual, or maybe it was just her. She lay there for a moment, staring at the ceiling, her stomach tight and empty, a dull ache that had not gone away. For a second, she thought about the meal she had given away, about how easily she had let it go, and how difficult this morning felt because of it. But then she pushed herself up, swinging her legs over the edge of the bed. There was no time to dwell. There never was. By 7:30, she was already walking down the busy sidewalk, the city coming alive around her. People rushed past with coffee cups in hand, dressed in clean coats and pressed shirts, moving with purpose. Lily kept her head down, her pace steady, her mind focused on one thing. She needed another job. The restaurant she worked at barely covered rent, and even that felt uncertain now. The warning from her manager still echoed in her head. One more mistake, and she was done. She stopped in front of a tall glass building, its polished exterior reflecting the morning light like something untouchable. A sign near the entrance read, Hayes Dining Group Headquarters. Lily hesitated. She had seen the name before, printed on menus, stamped on delivery boxes, whispered by coworkers as one of the biggest restaurant chains in the state. Places like this did not hire people like her. Not really. But she tightened her grip on the folder in her hands, the one holding her resume, slightly wrinkled but carefully organized. She had spent all night rewriting it, trying to make her experience sound like more than it was. She stepped inside. The lobby was quiet, almost too quiet, the kind of silence that made every footstep echo. A receptionist sat behind a sleek desk, her posture perfect, her expression neutral. Lily approached, offering a polite smile. "Hi, I am here to ask about job openings," she said, her voice soft but steady. The receptionist glanced at her, then at the folder, then back at her again. It was not rude, but it was not warm either. Applications are handled online, she replied. You can submit your resume through the website. Lily nodded, though she had already done that. Twice. I understand, she said, hesitating for just a second. I just thought maybe I could speak to someone directly. Before the receptionist could respond, the elevator doors opened behind them with a soft chime. A group of sharply dressed individuals stepped out, their voices low but confident, their movements efficient. Lily instinctively stepped aside, her eyes dropping as they passed. But something made her glance up, and in that brief moment, her breath caught. The man walking at the center of the group moved with quiet authority, his posture straight, his expression calm, his presence commanding in a way that did not need to be loud. His hair was neatly styled now, his coat tailored, every detail sharp and intentional. But it was his eyes that stopped her. The same eyes, the same tired depth, now hidden behind something more controlled. Ethan Hayes. He did not look at her at first. Why would he? To him, she was just another face in a lobby, another person passing through a space he owned. Lily felt her pulse quicken, confusion and disbelief colliding all at once. That could not be him. The man from the alley had been different. Worn, quiet, almost invisible. This man was anything but. But then, just as he passed, his gaze shifted. It was brief. Just a second. But in that second, recognition flickered. Subtle. Controlled. Real. Lily stood frozen as he continued walking, the group following him without question. The elevator doors closed behind them, and just like that, he was gone. The lobby returned to its quiet stillness, but Lily felt like the ground beneath her had shifted. The man she had given her only meal to was not just a stranger. He was something else entirely, and she had just stepped into his world without even realizing it. For a moment, Lily did not move. The sound of the elevator doors closing echoed softly through the lobby, but it felt distant, like it belonged to another world. Her fingers tightened around the folder she was holding, the edges pressing into her skin as her mind struggled to catch up with what she had just seen. It was him. It had to be. The same man who had stood in the alley, quiet and worn, holding her only meal like it mattered more than anything else. And yet, this version of him was different. Untouchable. Composed. A man people stepped aside for without being asked. Miss? The receptionist's voice pulled her back. Lily blinked, forcing herself to refocus. Yes, I am sorry, she said quickly, her voice a little unsteady. I understand. I will apply online again. The receptionist gave a polite nod, already turning back to her screen. The moment was over, dismissed as easily as any other interaction that passed through that building. But for Lily, it was anything but ordinary. She stepped outside, the glass doors sliding shut behind her, and the noise of the city rushed back in. Car horns in the distance, footsteps on the sidewalk, the low hum of life continuing without pause. She stood there for a second, her thoughts racing. Why had he been there like that last night? Why had he asked her for food when he clearly did not need it? The question lingered, unsettling in a way she could not ignore. It felt like something important had happened, something she did not fully understand yet. She looked back at the building, its tall structure rising into the sky, polished and distant. People walked in and out without hesitation, like they belonged there. She did not. Not really. But she had stepped inside anyway. And somehow, she had walked out with more questions than answers. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Lily returned to the restaurant for her shift, her movements automatic, her mind elsewhere. She took orders, delivered plates, smiled when needed. But every now and then, her thoughts drifted back to the lobby, to the moment their eyes met. There had been recognition there. She was sure of it. He had seen her. He just had not stopped. Around mid-afternoon, the restaurant grew busier, the steady flow of customers filling every table. Lily moved quickly, balancing trays, weaving between chairs. She was placing a plate down when her manager's voice called out sharply. Carter, table 12 has been waiting. I am on it, she replied, turning immediately. But as she approached the table, something felt different. The air, the energy, the subtle shift in attention from the other staff. Conversations lowered. Heads turned, just slightly. Lily slowed as she reached the table. And then she saw him. Ethan Hayes sat there, calm and composed, dressed in the same sharp suit from earlier, his presence unmistakable in the small space. Across from him sat two other men in business attire, but it was clear who held the focus. Lily's breath caught for just a second before she forced herself to step forward. Professional. Steady. Just like any other table. Good afternoon, she said, her voice controlled despite the sudden rush of emotion. Can I get you anything else? Ethan looked up. This time, there was no distance, no distraction. His gaze met hers directly, steady and knowing. And for a brief moment, the noise of the restaurant seemed to fade again, just like it had in the alley. Actually, he said, his tone calm, measured, but carrying something beneath it. I was hoping to speak with you. The words landed softly, but they changed everything. Lily stood there, her heart beating just a little faster, the weight of that simple sentence settling in. Whatever this was, it was not a coincidence anymore. It was something else entirely, and she was right in the middle of it. The world around Lily seemed to narrow to the space between her and the man sitting at table 12. For a second, she forgot the weight of the tray in her hand, the hum of conversations, the clinking of glasses. Everything blurred into the background as Ethan Hayes looked at her like he had been expecting this moment. Her fingers tightened slightly around the notepad she carried, grounding herself. Of course, she said, keeping her voice steady, though her pulse had picked up. What can I help you with? One of the men sitting across from him glanced between them, sensing something unspoken, but Ethan simply leaned back slightly in his chair, calm and composed, as if this was just another business interaction. A few minutes of your time, he replied, his tone polite but firm. Lily hesitated. This was not normal. Customers did not ask waitresses for private conversations, and something in his expression told her this had nothing to do with the menu. I am working right now, she said carefully, aware of her manager's eyes always somewhere nearby. Ethan nodded, as if he had expected that answer. I understand. Then I will wait until you are finished. It was not a request. It was a decision. Lily swallowed, unsure whether to feel uneasy or curious. All right, she said quietly before stepping away, her movements suddenly more deliberate as she returned to her tasks. But the rhythm of her work had shifted. Every few minutes, she found herself glancing toward table 12. He did not rush her. He did not call her over again. He simply continued his meeting, speaking in low, measured tones, occasionally making notes, completely at ease in a place where she felt like she was constantly trying to keep up. Time stretched longer than usual. When her shift finally ended, the relief was mixed with something else. Anticipation. Lily clocked out, her hands slightly unsteady as she removed her apron and set it aside. For a moment, she considered slipping out through the back, avoiding whatever conversation he wanted to have. It would be easier, simpler, but something held her in place. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was the memory of that night in the alley, the way he had looked at her like what she did mattered. Or maybe it was the feeling that walking away now would leave too many unanswered questions. She took a breath and stepped back onto the floor. Table 12 was empty. Her heart dropped for a brief second, a strange disappointment catching her off guard. But then she heard a voice behind her. I was beginning to think you might leave without saying goodbye. She turned. Ethan stood a few feet away, no longer surrounded by executives or conversation, just him now, his presence quieter but no less steady. Up close, he looked different again. Less distant. More familiar. I thought you might have already left, she replied, crossing her arms lightly, a small barrier between them. He gave a faint smile, subtle but real. I do not usually leave things unfinished. The words carried more meaning than they should have, and Lily felt it. So, she said after a moment, her gaze steady now. Are you going to tell me why you were in that alley last night? Ethan did not answer right away. Instead, he studied her, like he was measuring something not visible on the surface. Because I needed to see something for myself, he said finally. And you answered that question. Lily frowned slightly, confusion mixing with something sharper. You mean you were testing people? The idea landed heavier than she expected. Ethan did not deny it. I wanted to understand what my restaurants mean to people beyond the menu, he said calmly. What happens outside the dining room, when no one is watching? Lily let out a quiet breath, the pieces starting to connect in a way she was not sure she liked. So that was it? She asked, her voice quieter now, but edged with something more guarded. You were just observing. Ethan shook his head slightly. No, he said, his tone shifting just enough to feel different. That was not just observation. He paused, his gaze holding hers. That was the first honest thing I have seen in a long time. The words caught her off guard, disarming in their simplicity. For a moment, Lily did not know what to say. She had expected an explanation, maybe even an apology. Not this. Not something that sounded almost like respect. The silence between them stretched, filled with everything neither of them had said yet. And in that silence, Lily realized something had changed. Whatever this was, it was no longer just about a meal shared in an alley. It was something bigger, and it was just beginning. The silence between them did not feel empty anymore. It felt charged, like something important was waiting just beneath the surface, something neither of them had fully said yet. Lily shifted her weight slightly, her arms still crossed, her guard not entirely down. "You make it sound like I did something extraordinary," she said, her voice quieter now, but steady. "I just gave you food." Ethan studied her for a moment, his expression thoughtful, almost careful. "You gave away the only thing you had left," he replied. "There is a difference." The words settled between them, heavier than she expected. Lily looked away briefly, her gaze drifting toward the dimmed dining area, the empty tables, the faint reflections of lights on polished surfaces. "People do that sometimes," she said, though her tone lacked conviction. "Not in my experience," Ethan answered. There was no judgment in his voice, just a quiet certainty that made it harder to dismiss. Lily let out a small breath, her fingers tightening slightly against her arms. "So what now?" she asked, turning back to him. "You saw what you needed to see. Does that mean the experiment is over?" Ethan's expression shifted, just slightly, enough for her to notice. "It was never just an experiment," he said. "But you are right about one thing. It does not end there." He reached into the inside pocket of his coat, pulling out a simple card and holding it between his fingers for a second before offering it to her. Lily hesitated, then took it. The card was clean, minimal, with a name she already knew and a title that carried more weight than anything she had ever held before. Ethan Hayes, Chief Executive Officer, Hayes Dining Group. Her thumb brushed lightly over the embossed lettering, as if touching it might somehow make it less real. "I want to offer you a position," he said, his voice calm, direct. Lily blinked, looking up at him. "A position?" "At one of my flagship restaurants," he continued. "Front of house training, management track. Full-time. Benefits included." The words came easily, like this was a decision already made. Lily stared at him, disbelief flickering across her face. "You do not even know me," she said, a hint of something sharper beneath her confusion. "You saw me for 5 minutes in an alley." Ethan did not flinch. "I saw enough," he replied. Lily shook her head slightly, a small, almost incredulous laugh escaping her. "That does not make sense," she said. "People do not get jobs like that just because they shared a meal." "No," Ethan agreed quietly. "They do not." He paused, then added, "But this is not about the meal. It is about what it represents." Lily's grip tightened on the card. The offer felt unreal, too sudden, too big. A way out of everything she had been struggling through, placed directly in front of her like it was nothing. And that was exactly what made it hard to accept. "Why me?" she asked, her voice softer now, but more serious. Ethan held her gaze, steady and unshaken. "Because you reminded me of something I forgot," he said. "And I do not want to forget it again." The answer was not what she expected. It was not about qualifications or experience or numbers. It was something else entirely. And that made it both more meaningful and more complicated. Lily looked down at the card again, the weight of it suddenly real in her hand. This could change everything. Her job, her life, the constant pressure of barely making it through each day. But beneath that possibility, there was something else. A question she could not ignore. Slowly, she lifted her eyes back to his. "And what happens if I say no?" she asked. Ethan's expression softened, just slightly, the first real hint of something personal breaking through his composed exterior. "Then I respect that," he said, "but I will still remember what you did." The simplicity of the answer caught her off guard again. No pressure, no demand, just a choice. Lily stood there, the card in her hand, the night stretching quietly around them. For the first time in a long while, the next step in her life was not already decided for her. It was right there, waiting, and she was the one who had to choose. Lily did not answer right away. The card rested in her hand, heavier than it should have been, like it carried more than just a job offer. It carried a decision that could change everything. She slipped it into her jacket pocket slowly, almost carefully, as if rushing the moment might break it. "I need time," she said finally, her voice calm but firm. Ethan nodded once, as if he had expected that too. "Take it," he replied. Opportunities should not feel like pressure. For a brief second, something in his expression softened again, but it was gone just as quickly, replaced by that same composed control. "I will have my office expect your call," he added, before stepping back, giving her space not just physically, but in a way that felt intentional. Lily watched him for a moment longer, then turned and walked out of the restaurant, the cool night air meeting her again like it always did. But this time, it felt different. Not colder, not heavier, just uncertain. The walk home felt longer than usual. Every step seemed filled with the same question repeating in her mind. Why me? The city lights blurred slightly as she moved through familiar streets, past places she had seen 100 times before, but tonight, nothing felt quite the same. When she reached her building, she climbed the narrow staircase slowly, her hand brushing against the worn railing, each step creaking under her weight. Inside her small room, everything looked exactly as she had left it. The same thin bed, the same chipped table, the same silence. But she was not the same person who had walked out that morning. Lily sat down at the edge of her bed and pulled the card from her pocket again. She stared at it, turning it slightly under the dim light, watching how the letters caught the glow. Ethan Hayes, Chief Executive Officer. It still did not feel real. She thought about the alley, the cold, the empty feeling in her stomach. The moment she had decided to give everything anyway. It had not felt like a life-changing decision. It had just felt like the right thing to do. And now this. She leaned back slightly, her thoughts drifting to the restaurant, to the way people had looked at him, to the quiet authority in every step he took. That world was nothing like hers. It never had been. And stepping into it, it would mean more than just a new job. It would mean changing everything she knew. Her routine, her identity, the way people saw her, the way she saw herself. Lily closed her eyes for a moment, letting the weight of it settle. Could she do that? Could she walk into a place where she had always felt like she did not belong and claim a space for herself? A soft knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. She opened her eyes, a slight crease forming between her brows. No one visited her. Not here. Not like this. The knock came again, gentle but certain. Lily stood, moving toward the door slowly, a quiet sense of curiosity mixing with caution. She opened it just enough to see. A woman stood in the hallway, dressed neatly, her posture straight, her expression polite but purposeful. "Lily Carter?" she asked. Lily nodded, unsure. "Yes." The woman offered a small, professional smile. "My name is Claire. I work with Mr. Hayes." Lily's heart skipped, just slightly. "He asked me to deliver something to you." Claire extended a small, neatly wrapped package. Lily hesitated for a fraction of a second before taking it. It was light, simple, no logo, no explanation. "He said you would understand," Claire added gently, before stepping back. "Have a good evening, Miss Carter." And just like that, she turned and walked away, leaving Lily standing in the doorway with the package in her hands and a new question forming in her mind. Slowly, she closed the door and returned to her bed, setting the package in front of her. Her fingers hovered over it for a moment before she carefully unwrapped it. Inside, resting quietly against the plain paper, was something she recognized instantly. The same simple plastic container from that night. Clean now. Empty. But not forgotten. Lily stared at it, her breath catching slightly as the memory came rushing back, clear and sharp. And then she saw it. Tucked neatly inside, folded once. A note. She unfolded it slowly, her eyes scanning the words written in neat, steady handwriting. "You said food tastes better when it is shared. I think you were right. But I think something else matters more. The person you choose to share it with." Lily sat there in silence, the container resting in her hands, the words settling deep in a place she had not expected. This was not just an offer anymore. It was a reminder, a choice, and somehow, it made the decision in front of her feel even bigger than before. Lily did not sleep much that night. The container rested on the small table beside her bed, catching the faint glow of the streetlight outside, a quiet reminder that something had shifted in her life, whether she was ready for it or not. She lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying everything over and over again. The alley, the offer, the note, the look in his eyes when he said he would remember. By morning, The decision had not become easier, but it had become clearer. Some choices were not about certainty. They were about courage. At 8:15, Lily stood outside the same glass building again, her reflection staring back at her through the polished surface. The same jacket, the same worn shoes. Nothing had changed on the outside, but inside, something was different. She reached into her pocket, her fingers brushing against the card and the folded note, grounding herself for just a second before pushing the door open and stepping inside. The lobby felt just as quiet as the day before, but this time, she did not hesitate. She walked straight to the reception desk, her steps steady, her shoulders held just a little higher. The receptionist looked up, recognition flickering briefly. "Good morning," Lily said, her voice calm but certain. "I am here to see Mr. Hayes." There was a pause, just long enough to feel intentional, before the receptionist nodded. "Of course. He is expecting you." The words landed differently this time. Expecting you. Not dismissing. Not redirecting. Lily followed the instructions to the elevator, her reflection shifting in the mirrored walls as the doors closed behind her. As the numbers climbed, her heart beat just a little faster, but she did not step back. When the doors opened, the atmosphere changed immediately. The floor was quieter, more controlled, every movement purposeful. A woman in a tailored suit approached her with a polite smile. "Miss Carter, I am Claire. We met yesterday." Lily nodded, recognizing her instantly. "This way, please." They walked down a long hallway lined with glass walls and soft lighting, the kind of space that made everything feel important without needing to say it out loud. At the end of the hall, Claire stopped in front of a large door. "He is inside," she said gently, before stepping aside. Lily took a small breath and knocked. "Come in." The voice was calm, familiar. She opened the door and stepped inside. Ethan stood near the window, the city stretching out behind him in wide, endless lines of buildings and streets. He turned as she entered, his expression steady, but there was something else there now. Not surprise, not curiosity, something quieter, something like recognition. "You came," he said simply. Lily stepped forward, her hand reaching into her pocket as she pulled out the card and placed it gently on the desk between them. "I did," she replied, "but not for the reason you think." Ethan raised an eyebrow slightly, waiting. Lily met his gaze, her voice firm now, clearer than it had ever been. "I am not here because I need help," she said. "And I am not here because you felt something in that alley." She paused, just long enough for the words to settle. "I am here because if I say yes, it has to mean something real. Not just for me. For people like me." The room seemed to still around them, the quiet stretching just a little longer than before. Ethan did not interrupt. He did not look away. "So if I accept your offer," Lily continued, her tone steady but carrying. "Wait now, then I want something in return. Not money, not status." She took a small step closer, her voice softer, but stronger at the same time. "I want a program. Real food. Real access. For people who cannot afford to sit in your restaurants. I want them to matter too." The words hung in the air, bold and undeniable. For a moment, nothing moved. Then, slowly, Ethan's expression shifted. Not into surprise. Not into resistance. Into something deeper. Respect. He nodded once, thoughtful, deliberate. "You are asking to change how my company operates," he said. Lily held her ground. "I am asking you to remember why it should." Silence again. But this time, it was different. Not uncertain. Decisive. Ethan stepped forward, closing the distance between them just slightly. "Then we build it," he said. "Together." And in that moment, Lily realized something important. This was no longer about an offer. It was about a partnership. A choice that would not just change her life, but the lives of people she had once stood beside. And for the first time, the path ahead did not feel impossible. It felt real. 3 months later, the same city moved at the same relentless pace, but inside one corner of it, something had changed. The restaurant on Fifth Avenue looked no different from the outside: polished glass, warm lighting, the quiet elegance that drew in customers every evening. But inside, near the entrance, there was something new. A simple sign, clean and understated, read, "Last Meal Initiative." No grand announcement. No dramatic display. Just a quiet promise. Lily stood near the front, watching as a young man hesitated by the doorway, his eyes scanning the room like he was not sure he belonged. She recognized that look immediately. She had worn it herself not long ago. "It is okay," she said gently, stepping forward. "You can come in." He glanced at her, unsure, then nodded slowly and stepped inside. No one stared. No one judged. A server approached with the same respect they would offer any guest, guiding him to a table without hesitation. Lily exhaled softly, something warm settling in her chest as she watched the moment unfold. This was real. This was happening. Behind her, the quiet sound of footsteps approached. "You were right," Ethan said, his voice low but clear. Lily turned slightly, a small smile forming before she could stop it. "About what?" she asked, though she already knew. He stepped beside her, his gaze moving across the room, taking in the subtle details that most people would miss. The way staff moved without distinction between guests. The way no one was turned away. The way something as simple as a meal had become something more. "About what food can mean," he said. Lily looked back toward the young man, now sitting at a table, a plate being set in front of him with the same care as any other order. "It was never just about the food," she replied quietly. Ethan glanced at her, a faint smile touching his expression. "No," he agreed. "It was about the choice behind it." For a moment, they stood there in comfortable silence, the kind that did not need to be filled. The program had started small, one location, one idea, but it had grown faster than either of them expected. Not because it was forced, but because it made sense. Because people understood it. Because it mattered. Lily crossed her arms lightly, her gaze thoughtful. "I used to think survival was enough," she said after a moment. "Just getting through the day, making sure there was something left for tomorrow." She paused, then added, "But this feels different." Ethan nodded slightly, his attention still on the room, but his focus shifting back to her. "It is," he said. "You changed the question." Lily frowned just a little, curious. "What do you mean?" He looked at her fully now, his voice steady, but carrying something more personal beneath it. "Before, it was about what we could take from this business," he said. "Profit, growth, expansion." He paused, just briefly. "Now it is about what we can give back." The words settled between them, simple but powerful. Lily let out a quiet breath, her shoulders relaxing just slightly. "Then it is worth it," she said. Ethan studied her for a moment, like he was weighing something unspoken. Then, slowly, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out something small. Familiar. The same plastic container. This time, it was not empty. He held it out to her. Lily blinked, surprised, before taking it carefully. Inside was a simple meal, nothing extravagant, but prepared with care. "Thought we should try it again," he said, a hint of something lighter in his tone. Lily looked up at him, a quiet warmth spreading through her chest. "This time," he added, "we both eat." She smiled then, genuine and unguarded, the kind of smile that came from something deeper than just the moment. "Food tastes better when it is shared," she said softly. Ethan nodded, his expression steady, but there was something new there now.